Good morning. Welcome, everyone. So let's start, as we always should. Well, let me first introduce myself. My name is LeeDelle. For those of you that don't know me, I have a ministry here. It's called Beacons4Victims. My ministry is to bring awareness that human trafficking is happening. It is happening in our community. It's happening in your community. And those of you that are online watching, it's happening in your community too. So let's start, as we always should. Let's start in prayer. So Dwight Carr, our missions director, is going to lead us in prayer.
Hey, good morning. Just really quick, let me just go ahead and say that, I'm the missions director here, and this is truly a mission of God. We don't need to go across the world to serve the Lord. There's ministry right here. And the Lord said that if you do this to the least of these, my brothers, my sisters, you've done it unto me. So God bless you, Miss LeeDelle, for doing it for the least of them, right? Because the least of them is the best of us, right? We're all one in Christ Jesus. So Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to come. I pray, Lord, that we would shed light and life onto this subject, Lord, that you would fill each one of us with your knowledge, with your wisdom, with your understanding. And Lord, I pray that you would overflow our hearts with your love. Bless each of the speakers here today. Lead them in thought and in word. And I lift this up now in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Our first speaker is a beautiful, beautiful woman. She's been through a lot in her life, and she is very, very brave to come forward and share her story with you. I want you to understand that. This is not an easy thing for survivors to do. In case you didn't know, a survivor of human trafficking is someone who has been out of the life, has not been trafficked for any amount of time. So if they've been out for a year, they're a survivor. If they've been out for a day, they're a survivor. If they've been out for 30 years, they're a survivor. So I would like to introduce to you a good friend of mine, April, who's going to give you her testimony.
All right. Good morning, and thank you so much for taking your time out of your Saturday to come and support LeeDelle and all of the wonderful work our community is doing to make a difference in the lives of victims and survivors of human trafficking. I'd like to introduce myself and allow you to get to know a little more about me. I am first and foremost a daughter of Jesus Christ. Oh. Thank you. And it was in a Calvary Chapel in Santee, California, where I met and found my identity in Christ. I'm a wife. My husband, Robbie, and I have been together for 16 years. We were married in 2006, divorced in 2009, and remarried in 2015. I am a mom. Robbie and I have a son, Nathan, who is 14 years old, and we also have 3 children who are with the Lord. I'm a graduate. In December 2020, at 33 years old, I completed my bachelor's degree. With an emphasis in human trafficking at Vanguard University. I'm an outreach and human trafficking coordinator with an organization who goes into the hard-to-reach places and empowers those caught up in cycles of addiction, incarceration, and sexual exploitation. I'm a child sex trafficking survivor. It's a sobering fact, but I am only 1% of victim survivors of exploitation who have gotten out of the life, went to college, and have the privilege of standing up here in front of you today. Before I start unpacking how my exploitation began, I just want to speak a word of encouragement, as some of you here today may already be in the fight against human trafficking, or you may just be getting involved, and for others, this may be your first time hearing about human trafficking. And I want to assure you that it's okay. We all are here to learn today, and we all have different skills and abilities we can bring to the anti-human trafficking movement. For me personally, 6 years ago, I didn't even know what human trafficking was or meant until I heard someone share her story. I actually got invited to this event, and that's where I met LeeDelle and heard the survivor so brave and courageous in sharing her story. But you know what stuck out to me that day was that there were so many similarities in our experiences, and also hearing someone be able to openly talk about the deep hurt, pain, guilt, and shame that at that time I only just carried inside. I certainly had no idea that I was a victim or that I would ever be able to identify as a survivor as I do today. I grew up with a single mother who had 3 young girls, 5 years old and younger, before she was 25 years old. Having minimal resources, we were forced to move around a lot in the states of Washington and Oregon. We often struggled to have our basic needs met, like stable housing, food, protective care, and we even lacked being able to attend school regularly. These are just some of the factors that left my 2 younger sisters and I vulnerable. The first time I experienced sexual trauma the first time I experienced sexual trauma is when I was 3 years old. And by 5 years old, my first abuser would come into our lives through a relationship that began between his daughter and my mom, and he would be a part of my life for the next 4 years. In a conversation I was able to have with my mom, she was sharing with me that subconsciously, she knew that something wasn't right when she first met our abuser. But what drew her to him was his charm. He was also helpful. He took his time to get to know us. He had a car. He would offer to buy us food, eventually helped us with a home. And over time, as he began to gain trust, to where he even became like a part of the family. And she shared that with me because that's what she would want to share with other mothers, especially young mothers who are vulnerable and at risk to being targeted and caught up in a situation that is sometimes beyond control and almost feels like I've heard it referred to so many times as a choice for those who have no choice. I want to visit a topic called grooming. And before I move on, if at any time you need to step out, I want you to please know that I will not take it personally, and it's really important to me that you take care of yourself today. Grooming is an action that a trafficker, a pimp, or an exploiter uses with the intention of committing a sexual offense against a person who is vulnerable or at risk. And this is important to understand because grooming is a common form of how exploitation begins today. My grooming process began at the age of 7 years old. My abuser took notice of how physically and verbally abusive my mom was, and when he was around, he treated me like I wasn't worthless or unwanted. He gave me the attention I desired so badly to have from my mom. He told me I was loved, that I was beautiful, and he took notice of how I was already like a mother figure to my 2 younger sisters. But little did I know his kindness would come with a price. Eventually, there came a time where my sisters and I would begin staying with our abuser, which is known as harboring, and my grooming would become more and more as he would begin introducing me to pornography. The interesting thing is at 7 years old, I knew what I had just experienced was wrong, but even remember wondering when my abusive mom would come back to get my 2 sisters and I. I can't recall an exact timeline, but my abuser then began using inappropriate touching, molestation, and then it became the horrors of being raped. As more research has been done on the common use of power and control experienced by victims and survivors, there have been 3 common elements of trafficking, which include the use of force, fraud, and coercion. I do want to note that in the law as it is written now, for anyone under the age of 18 years old, force, fraud, and coercion is not required in order for a trafficker to be prosecuted. However, I would like to give an example of how my abuser would use each of the elements. He would use force through threats of harming my mom. And even though she was abusive, I was very protective over her. And for a lot of those of you who know me, I am still protective over her even to this day. My abuser would use fraud through false promises, and sometimes that looked like one moment saying he loved me, and then the next moment physically, emotionally, and sexually abusing me. And he would use coercion through psychological manipulation to make me truly believe that when I was being abused, it was because he loved me. At the age of 10, an investigation was started on my abuser after he raped a cousin who was a little older than me. And she had the courage to speak up and say something. And on September 29th, 1999, my abuser was prosecuted, sentenced, and he's been in prison for 24 years. As a result of that trial, I was granted permission to come to California to reside with my dad and my stepmom. However, this was also before there was any knowledge on the effects of how to deal with what is now known as complex trauma. So with no tools and resources available to help me understand and work through what I had experienced, as well as the devastation of being hurt by other major male figures in my life after coming to California, by age 13 until my early adult years, my distorted view of sex and love led me to look for validation by using my body and living a promiscuous lifestyle. And I would find myself in many relationships, which are often more commonly referred to as a Romeo or boyfriend. And this is a common tactic pimps and traffickers use to not only lure victims, but also a reason why victims will often go back to the only life they know. Out of high school at 18 years old, I decided to join the military, and also around the same time met my husband, Robbie, on MySpace. And for those of you who don't know what MySpace is, believe it or not, it was worse than Facebook. And then if I could just, I'll pause for a minute. A lot of the reason why I went into the military is because right out of high school, I was getting involved in gangs and drug dealing, and if I would have continued in that lifestyle, I don't know what my life would have looked like now, or even if I would have been here at that time. Gangs and trafficking and drugs, it's all intertwined. And that's on a whole nother level of organized crime. But I am thankful that I had the opportunity to go into the military, and I really do believe that I can look back and see the Lord's hand all throughout my life and how he has really protected me from certain things, but has also brought so much restoration and healing through my life. So right before I joined the military, Robbie and I did meet online. I was born here and raised in Orange County, and Robbie was from San Diego, so even that is a whole story for another time, but meeting a man in another county and running off and falling in love, I'm so grateful that he's a godly man, and he has really walked alongside me all throughout my trauma and throughout my healing process. Out of boot camp, I got stationed in San Diego, and Robbie and I were married and pregnant within the first year of our marriage. Deep down inside, being married and having a family was a deep desire of my heart, but I didn't grasp the concept and understanding of what a healthy relationship or marriage looked like. After 3 years of marriage, I was unfaithful, which led to our divorce. I was an unfit mother to our son, Nathan, and also caused even further destruction by having 3 abortions. These choices, along with the undealt with layers upon layers of previous trauma, led me into a deep spiral of depression, and by the age of 25 years old, I came to a rock-bottom breaking point and considered ending my life through suicide. Deep down inside, I knew I wanted to change, but I didn't even know where to begin. I knew I could continue down a path of destruction if I didn't make a change. Although it was in that very broken place that I also considered doing the one thing I had experienced a handful of times, and knew there was something different about it, and that was to walk into church. The only time I had ever stepped into church before was with Robbie. And he was so faithful during that time, knowing that we were so unequally yoked and I was so broken and had so much trauma, yet he was still willing to invite me and take me to church. But on a Wednesday night, I walked into my local Calvary Chapel on my own, and it was there that I found my faith in Christ, and my life began to be transformed into the woman I am today. And you know what? Perhaps you've been praying for a loved one, and my encouragement to you is to never give up praying and continuing to meet that person right where they're at. There was so many times that Robbie and I were divorced for 6 years, and he'll tell me now that there were so many times where he would just be up in the night and he would be praying that I would be able to find my faith in Christ, and that I would be able to be transformed into the woman and the wife that he knew that the Lord had designed me to be and created me to be. I would like to share about my husband's mother, Kathy. She had such a huge impact in my life. Kathy was a great mentor to me. In fact, she was one of the first people who came alongside me as I was trying to get my life right. Kathy was an advocate. She deeply desired for there to be reconciliation between Robbie and I know she would be so proud of how far we have both come today. Kathy was also a friend. She was willing to meet me right where I was at, and I am truly grateful for that. Kathy was a survivor too, who also endured childhood sexual abuse. As a result of having no tools and resources available to her through her trauma, she endured a treacherous battle and struggle with mental health, alcohol, and substance abuse. And these are just some of the factors that led to the tragic loss of her life in 2013. As I begin to transition into a closing, I'd like to share that today, my husband Robbie and I have created a nonprofit organization in honor of his mom's name, the Catherine Elaine Gallegos Foundation, or what we like to refer to by using her initials, KEG, as Keeping Every Girl Free. Our mission is really simple. It's dedicated to providing victim survivors of human trafficking with a source of hope by providing a tangible tool and resource in the form of a 24/7 hotline number. And this is done by placing the hotline number on bars of soap and makeup remover wipes, which are put into motels, hotels, and in gift bags that are given to victims during street outreach. Over the last 9 months, we have partnered with 30 motel partners throughout Orange County. We've distributed 50,000 bars of soap, and we currently plan to continue our efforts into LA County with an ambitious goal of distributing 50,000 makeup remover wipes for the upcoming Super Bowl on February 13th. I also wanted to share that we believe in this strategy as a way to reach victims by going into the places where they have access to find soap bars or makeup remover wipes. Oftentimes when a victim is called to go into a motel to service a John or a sex buyer, that's the only moment that she has away from her trafficker and from other girls that she might be trafficked with. So this is the best way to be able to get a resource, a tangible resource, into their hands. I also wanted to share that we believe in this strategy as a way to reach victims from research that was done by the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which showed that over 6,000 calls have been made by victims from motels and hotels. And with her permission to share this, we actually have a current survivor who called the Orange County hotline number, and she's now been out of her trafficking situation for 90 days. This survivor is currently in a 1-year transitional safe house. She did call the Orange County hotline. She was able to come in with one of our service partners, Strong Beginnings, and then she was actually able to talk to one of the advocates and get into this long-term safe house. And, you know, this survivor, she is having her basic needs met of shelter, food, and safety. but she's also in a place of refuge. So where over this next year, throughout this next year, she can really begin to continue this process of healing through her trauma. To further celebrate and brag about her a little bit, she was filled with so much joy as she just recently got to experience her first sober and safe Christmas. As I close, my traumatic past does not define who I am, but has certainly made me into who I am today. My life has so much purpose in knowing that I can make a difference by sharing my story, and a passion to advocate for the many victims of human trafficking still out there, one soap bar and one makeup remover at a time. Thank you so much.
So thank you, April. That was absolutely beautiful. I do have one question I'd like to ask you. What advice would you give to parents and to young people to not get caught in a trap of trafficking?
My advice is to really go out and look at all the resources that are out there. There are so many great organizations that are involved and doing things to make a difference. And there is one mom here, Tracy. We were we were able to have a soap event, actually. She hosted it at her home. She had her daughter invite all of her friends, from high school, and we sat there and just ate snacks and labeled soap bars and had this beautiful conversation about boundaries and how to protect themselves and how to advocate for themselves and for their peers. And their response was so beautiful, and it was so great to hear about just the different challenges they have with social media, the different challenges they have at school. But, we really hope that the information we were able to share with them is just going to be able to help them advocate for themselves and for their peers. And then I think my next encouragement of advice would be to choose an organization to partner with. There's a ton out there. You can also pick a book, a blog, or get connected with your local human trafficking task force. Normally they have like general meetings or opportunities for volunteer or, putting out events like this where you can just learn more. And also just use your voice. When my husband and I go into these motels and hotels, a lot of the managers, they see it happening. They know that human trafficking is happening. A lot of times they just don't know what to do. So we are able to provide them, with a little postcard with information on human trafficking. It also has the hotline information on there, and then a way to reach us so that we can continue to put soaps into their motels and hotels. But we also have a bunch of cards out there. I just made a little business card with the hotline number on it, and I think it's just such a great resource. And even if you don't know if someone is a victim, you can at least just walk up and say, if you're looking for a safe place or you need a resource or somewhere to call, you can call this number, and one of the advocates, will be there will be able to unpack their situation and what's going on, and then also provide safety if that's available.
So would you like me to describe what happens when they call the hotline number? Yes. Okay. So when somebody from one of those motels gets her soap or facial wash and they call the local hotline number, there's a group out here, I don't see him in here, but they have a booth out here. It's called Lives Worth Saving. And I volunteer with that group. And part of what that group does is we call the escort websites, and we talk to the women about getting out of the life. And Lives Worth Saving is prepared to, if a woman says she wants to get out, Lives Worth Saving is run by Pastor Kevin Brown, who's a former police officer and Marine. So I'm going to do my caveat first. Do not try this at home. This is not something that you should do on your own ever. It is dangerous, but he has put in some safety precautions, policies. I have to say he's very strict about safety. If you don't feel safe, you don't do it. But what we do is then we will go and we will have the victim get away from their trafficker. We won't go in if the trafficker is there. It is too dangerous for her, the victim. It is too dangerous for us. We go in, we get her away, even if it's a block away, and we pick her up and we take her to a safe house so that she can get to safety. So that's the impact of what April is doing with her soaps and her facial washes. Okay. Thank you, April. Oh, one more thing?
I just have one more little thing to share. And it's that I truly believe with all of my heart and know that what has transformed my life is forgiveness. I truly have forgiven my parents, my abuser, and myself. Even greater than the forgiveness I have been able to extend, 2,000 years ago, Jesus came and died on the cross for each and every person in this room. You know, I know that he died for a very broken little girl. I know that he died for my broken parents and my broken abuser. And, you know, even if that means that he will have that defining moment, similar to the thief on the cross, I do believe that Jesus can save anyone at any time. I don't know what it is that you may have experienced, or, you know, and I'll let you fill in that blank. Maybe it is in this area of forgiveness. But I just want to let you know that if you want to explore that more, if you want to know what that means, we're available to talk, to share what it means, you know, to give your life to Christ, to receive. Maybe you need to receive prayer. Maybe maybe you walked away, or you're just feeling a little anxious or going through something, which we all are. So, you know, we're also available to receive prayer. And then I just encourage you to speak with somebody today. You know, go out to the tables and learn about what each organization is doing. And I'll never forget that Lynn Tran from the task force, she explained it as a big jigsaw puzzle. Each and every one of us is just one small little piece. But when you step back, you can see this beautiful jigsaw puzzle, or tapestry, as one of my beautiful friends reminded me of. You know, the back of a tapestry, there's strings everywhere. They intertwine. But when you look at the front, there's this beautiful, you know, image or picture there. So no matter what you're doing, how big or small, it could be even the makeup remover wipes, which are really little, but it makes a huge impact. So yeah, just get out and get connected.
Thank you, April. Okay, very good, April. That was absolutely beautiful. That's not an easy thing to do, as I said. So next, I'm blessed to have a couple of people from a mega church. Anybody heard of Saddleback before? Okay, these two people are going to talk to you about what Saddleback is doing about human trafficking. So Kathy and Isaac, come on up, please. Here, I'll give you that. Do we need to move this table? Is this table on the way? Okay. Okay, you want to sit this? Sure. Well, welcome, Kathy and Isaac. Oh, sorry, I need my questions. So let's start with Kathy, and then we'll talk to Isaac. Kathy, how did you get involved in anti-human trafficking?
Well, it's a little bit embarrassing, actually. My attitude was not real good. It was in 2010, there was a documentary shown at Saddleback Church, and that's how it started. At the time, I was a survivor of cancer. I had been diagnosed with a brain tumor and went through all of that, the surgery and radiation and all, and I had to retire from a home daycare that I had run for 26 years in Irvine, and that was my lane. That was what I loved, was the kids. And I was a little bit sad about that, but came back to Saddleback Church and was walking out of the sanctuary with my husband, and this young woman walks up, and she was smiling at me, and she handed me a flyer, and it said, "Come learn about human trafficking." I'm like, "No, thanks." And so I was like, it went like this. It was like, okay. I said, no, thanks. And she kind of walked up in front of me like this, and I'm like, no, thanks. And I'm kind of walking around, and she goes, and she puts it right in front of my face, and then she gets in my face, and she just goes, "It's happening in Orange County. You need to see this." And I was like, "Okay, all right, I'll take your darn flyer." I didn't say that. I just thought it, because big Christian woman that I am. And I took the flyer, and I was kind of irritated walking to the car with my husband, and I was like, oh man, that was a hard sell. That was church, what's this, human trafficking? And I'd heard a little bit about it being in Thailand. That was all I knew. And so the flyer came home with us, and it had a life of its own, and it sat on my Bible on the counter in the kitchen, and I kept walking by it, and I'm like, no, and every time I went to go throw it out, my hand got hot, and I was like, no. And have you ever had one of those things where it's a thought that's faster than you could think it? That's from God? Okay, so that was what's happening. You're going. It's like, no, I don't want to go. And, I've got other things going on. And anyway, I went. My husband had another commitment that night, so I went by myself, sat by the exit so I could leave early. And and it was in one of those big tents on Saddleback. Then this gal did her job of not letting people go by, because there were about 200 people in that tent. And I walk in, I'm like, okay, so sitting by the exit, sitting there, and it was this harrowing documentary called Playground, the child sex trade in America. Okay, here I was, Mrs. Child Development, bachelor's degree in child development, daycare. I knew nothing about this. And it went on, it was about an hour and a half. You could hear all of us sniffling, grown men wiping their eyes, and we're just, oh my gosh, And so anyway, being at the back, at the end of the thing, there was a sheriff deputy that talked about what was happening in Orange County, and this girl was right. And being next to the exit was being next to the sign-up sheet. So I was first at the sign-up sheet, put my name in, and I ended up at an outreach, very long story, very short. And there was this other young woman. It was at a homeless area here in Orange County at a park, and we're there on a mission. I was just learning. I knew nothing. And this young gal was trying to convince these women not to go with these guys that offer you a job or a house or love or anything, and just don't. And I'm thinking, wow, she knows what she's talking about. Turns out her parents were standing next to me, a couple named Ann and Howie, and their daughter, this girl, was an honor student at San Diego State, and this guy groomed her, like April was talking about, groomed her. He posed as a student, and she was missing for 2 years. This is a very, very long story, very, very short. Ann and Howie took the reins of the ministry and led it for about 7 years. They did an amazing job. And that's how I learned about human trafficking, went to lots of training.
So tell us, Kathy, tell us what Saddleback is doing today with their anti-human trafficking ministry.
Oh, okay. All right. Today, Ann and Howie were all about emergency aftercare. So we did that for about 3 years. And 3 of us couples who were empty nesters, my husband, Ann and Howie took in 24 survivors through some detectives who joined our team. And they were under very, very close scrutiny, like LeeDelle says, it is dangerous. But we were able to do it. My husband and I took in 5 extraordinary women who were tricked in horrible ways. One was sold by her parents in the valley. One was on a date, plentyoffish.com, went on the date. This guy put some stuff in her water. She woke up and he said, "You're coming with me or I'll kill your family." She was trafficked for a year in Central California. We ended up stopping that because we learned that you know how you chip your dog when it gets lost? Well, they were starting to do that with the girls. So we realized that we couldn't just hide their cell phones so this trafficker couldn't track them anymore. So we stopped doing that. And so 2 amazing ladies joined our team. Is Cindy Olivier here? Could you stand up, Cindy? No, she's got to hide. Okay, Cindy came along, and Janet Carrete, and she's a genius at the internet, and she just came along and took over some of the events that we were starting to do. One was a Christmas party we did December 4th, which served about 24 survivors and their families, and the donations were amazing. And Cindy every detail. You know, she oversaw every detail down to the size of shoes the kids wore and what type of little game they wanted, and every little detail, which would have driven me crazy. It's not my gift, it's hers. She's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. And LeeDelle is anybody here that was a volunteer that day on December 4th? Could you stand up? Stand up, please, 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 please. Yes, yes. It was an amazing day, and everybody just came together. It was a wonderful day. And LeeDelle, you should stand up too. And Santa Larry, where's Santa Larry? He was in there with the kids. But doing the Christmas party and a retreat, if we can get back to that, 2-day retreat after COVID we couldn't do, and just reaching out to their needs. And the gals that, you know, they call and the survivors, and through Sandy Alvarez back there with Strong Beginnings, and we, can you stand, Sandy? She's amazing. She helps us with resources, just in matching us up with the girls. So anyway, just providing things. And the one story that I love is one survivor was getting a Section 8 housing. She had nothing, absolutely nothing. So Cindy, we get this message from her. She goes, well, I'll pay $100 for a washer if we can do it. She had 2 children. And so Cindy reached out to our Saddleback campus in Torrance in Redondo Beach area. And it so happened a lady had just been on Price is Right, and she wanted a complete kitchen. And it was in storage because she was moving to a smaller place out of state, and she couldn't use it. So the men got a truck from Saddleback, and they brought this. It was a stove, a refrigerator, microwave, washer, and dryer, all in the box in her little Section 8 housing in Inglewood. So things like that happen, but it's been great.
Great. I am blessed to be a part of Saddleback's anti-human trafficking ministry. They include me in their some of the things that they're doing, and it's just an amazing group, and it's amazing things that you just heard that Saddleback is doing. They're doing much more. So, Kathy, what advice would you give to a church if they wanted to start their own anti-human trafficking ministry or grow their existing one?
Prayer. You know, like April was saying, prayer. You just start by praying and one really important thing is on a Saturday morning, come to a conference about human trafficking. You're here, you did it. Step 1, you're halfway there. What's the saying? Step 1, taking the first step, you're halfway there. You're here, you're listening, you're learning. That's huge. Getting ideas, networking, like April said, and just getting to know each other and what other people are doing, joining up with other people. You don't have to actually have your own ministry. You can align with another church that's doing it as well, like Calvary Refuge, and just get going. Just growing. And March 4th and 5th at Vanguard University, it's called Ensure Justice. It's a wonderful 2-day conference. That was one of the things we went to when we first started, and it teaches you everything you need to know. It's Dr. Sandra Morgan heads that up. It's a go-to. And team building. People come along with different time, talent, and expertise. I was a full-time daycare provider. I didn't have a lot of time, and I just could come to the meetings on, Tuesday nights and then these outreaches on Saturday. It took me a while to be able to get involved, and then I was retired, so I could do more. But just take the person's talent. We have a deputy DA just joined our team, and she kind of put us with some neat connections as well. And then tell everyone you know. As you leave, like April was saying, just tell everybody. Just say, guess what? Go to your water cooler at work and go, did you know that the top floor of a apartment complex in Irvine was busted a few months ago for being a major brothel, an international brothel? I'll go on the news, trying to find out, look it up, just Google it, and you'll find out a lot. Go on YouTube, there are a lot of survivor stories.
I want to respond. I wasn't going to do this, so this is a surprise, guys, with our impromptu questions. I wasn't going to go over this, but I want to say, if you feel led to start, if you're not at Refuge, if you're at Refuge, come see me. But if you're not at Refuge and you want to start a ministry at your church, Kathy said it, just step out and do it. You're not going to believe how I got involved in this. About 7 years ago, I was serving with another congregate here at Refuge, and I didn't feel like it was the right ministry for me that we were serving. And she had been involved in a human trafficking ministry at a previous church, and she says, why don't we start a human trafficking ministry? And I said, what's that? Okay, I mean, it was as simple as that. It's almost comical. And then you just pray. Believe it or not, I've made mistakes. I know those that know me don't believe that, but I made mistakes. But I did step out and I took a risk, and I'm so glad I did, because the Lord has just grown this ministry. It's not me, it's Him, because it's His ministry. So if you are feeling led to start a ministry at your church, I'd love to talk to you and give you some pointers, or just go and start one. And look where we're now. This started with what's human trafficking. So thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
Isaac, how did you get involved in anti-human trafficking?
Oh, boy. Well, actually, I moved here to California 6 years ago from Florida. And in my previous life in Florida, I was a self-defense instructor. So I actually taught women and kids how to defend themselves for 20 years. So when I got here to California, I asked the Lord, I said, what you want me to do with this gift you've given me? And He never prompted me to be a teacher. He never prompted me to open a school to teach anybody how to defend themselves. He brought my wife into my life, and she had me join Saddleback's ministry. Actually, I went through the 101 training and the 201 and all their classes, and only one ministry in all of the millions of choices that you have stuck out to me, and that was human trafficking. It just kept coming. It just kept being on TV. It kept being on my computer. It was on my phone. God was talking to me. I wasn't trying to listen, though. I wanted to teach people how to defend themselves through martial arts. That's what I wanted to do. God said no. He said, I got something bigger for you. I got human trafficking. I didn't even know what human trafficking was. And then I met Ann and Howie and went on a street outreach. And it was like a ton of bricks just hit me across the head. This is what I needed to get involved in.
Isaac, do you want to describe what a street outreach is, please?
Oh. So the street outreach that I actually was going on was going out to the area where you see ladies and then guys are coming up buying sex. So we would go out, and actually I was providing security for the ladies that were doing the approaching of the victims and trying to get them to come out of the life, seeing if they was ready to be rescued, and also providing little bags, gift bags for them. And my job was to basically protect them and be on the lookout. I didn't know what God was doing with that. I thought that was cool, but that's not where He wanted me. So He actually took me out of the outreach and put me in contact with the human trafficking ministry at Saddleback. And at the time, they had a men stand against trafficking ministry going. So I joined that. And then the coordinator had to step down. And I actually talked to Kathy and Cindy and said, I'll do it. I'll be that coordinator. I didn't want it to disappear. I thought it was something that needed to be done. And men standing against trafficking, actually, we went out on Beach and Ball here in Anaheim and held signs for an hour and a half. And that's all we did. It was a silent ministry. And we did that once a month. And that really spoke to me, and I started seeing a lot of things.
And what did the signs say?
The signs actually say if you need help, they give you the 1-800 number in both. Actually, we got it in 3 languages. We have it in Asian, we have it in Spanish, and we have it in English. And it also, there's a couple signs that tell you what to look out for. And there's a lot of different signs. But they're all for victims to see, even if they're riding with their trafficker. And we've noticed a couple of them would ride by and see the sign and kind of memorize it or write down the number on something. because we, just stand there with the signs demonstrating the 1-800 national hotline number. But that's not where God wanted me either. He said, okay, now that you've got your feet wet, it's time to jump into the deep end of where I want you. And then Cindy had a talk with my good friend, Tom Perez, who leads Epic Project, and they needed a coordinator for Orange County. They wanted to come to Southern California. And God said, now, this is where I want you. This is what I need you to do. This is what I brought you to California for. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about this, God. This is big. This is huge. This is talking to guys. I don't know about this. But he kept putting it on my heart. So then I met up with the founder, and we had a conversation at Starbucks in Stanton, actually. And that conversation has resonated with me. He told me all about what the Epic Project is, and it just got me on fire. I felt the Holy Spirit that night just light me up. I was hot. I went home. I couldn't sleep. I went and played basketball the next morning for 4 hours trying to just get my head around this. But it was where I needed to be. So fast forward, God brings the Epic Project to my mind. I meet Tom. And for everyone in here that doesn't know what the Epic Project is, the Epic Project is a project that is designed for buyer intervention, and it is calling men to step up. And just like we have conversations about everything else in life, from sports to money to our wives, this is what we're asking men to do. Step up, talk to men about what is causing them to want to pay for sex. What is causing them to want to answer an ad? What is causing them to want to continue to victimize women? What is causing them to look at women as an object? That's what we do. So we actually talk to guys. And the wonderful thing about it is the volunteers that are in this project, before I get that far. So our project is actually international. We went international in 2020 during COVID, believe it or not. We're actually in 21 cities between Canada and all of the U.S., from East Coast to West Coast. We actually have a team in Hartford. But they didn't have a team in Orange County, and that's why I was like, wait a minute, I'm in Southern California. Southern California has everything. We have entertainment. We have anything you want to do, get into. But we didn't have an opportunity for guys, men, to join the anti-human trafficking fight. There was absolutely nothing. So then I started, hey, why not? Let me just see what God's going to do. So I answered the call. And God brought 9 wonderful guys, and then a 10th one this year, during COVID, believe it or not. Brought 10 wonderful guys to me and said, okay, what you gonna do with these guys? And these guys are on fire. They truly, we had to, the project started in 2019 here in Orange County, but we had to put our training off for 1 whole year. And the guys still hung in there. They still wanted to be a part of this project. They still wanted to make a difference in Orange County, even as bad as the problem is. So then after that, the guys got trained this year, first part of March, a year and 2 months later. And then we started doing what we do. And throughout the Epic Project, being how it is international, we have a database of guys, but we're still always looking for more. This project here can be started from many different avenues, many different locations, and involve a lot of different guys.
So you're looking for volunteers?
I'm always actually looking for volunteers. Even though I have a strong core here in Orange County, I'm always looking for more volunteers. The wonderful thing about it, even though I'm a member of Saddleback Church, and I've actually had the pleasure of being introduced and hanging out with LeeDelle, I actually have a lot of my volunteers are from several different churches in the local area. So you don't have to be a member of Saddleback to be a part of our ministry. I just need you to pray, ask God, is this what you are called to do? And then, unlike me, don't run. Listen to that voice. Listen to the Spirit talk to you, because it will definitely talk to you. I tried running from the calling, and if anybody in here knows or have ever tried to run from God, it usually doesn't work. I'm living proof that it doesn't work. I tried running from him, and I told him this wasn't for me. He said, yeah, it's for you.
So those that live in the area, where is the closest church that you do, Epic?
So actually, in Orange County, we actually have 2 locations that you can join. We have a location if you're in southern Orange County. We got a location down there. I can put you, if you contact me, we can go through the whole process, and I'll put you in contact with that team. I also have a team here that out of Refuge that we're definitely looking for more volunteers for. And we now have a new team that we're going to be doing in Los Angeles County. So there is absolutely, in my mind, nowhere in California that Epic is not going to be. I'm just waiting on God to open the door to say, okay, this is the partners that I need you to partner with, talk with, and this is where we're going to start. Refuge and Pastor Allen was so great when I decided to start it here in Orange County. They stepped up to the plate and say, oh yeah, we like that. We'll help you. I didn't realize what that help would look like, but I'm looking out in this crowd and seeing what that help looks like. So like April said, and Kathy said, and LeeDelle has said, partnering, networking, finding out what people are doing. This project started small in Orange County, and it is fastly growing at a large rate. And we're looking at the Super Bowl as an event to put human trafficking to the limelight. Because before I moved to California, I didn't know what human trafficking was, and that was 6 years ago, which is crazy because I'm from Florida, and it's one of the hugest trafficking locations.
So the reason Super Bowl is important to advocates such as ourselves is Super Bowl is the highest trafficking week of the year because it brings many, many men and it brings trafficking. It's because they want to purchase sex. So there's some things that you can do that some of the exhibitors here have things going on during the week before Super Bowl that you might want to talk to some of the exhibitors because I know they're all looking for volunteers. So that's an opportunity that you can look into. And that would be just a one-time thing if you want to just, not biblical, but get your feet wet, I guess.
Can I say one thing real quick? Something that I had on my notes and everything. Fair Trade LA is out here. Jennifer, is her name Jennifer? Is she in the room? Alicia, I'm sorry. Alicia, are you in the room from Fair Trade LA? Okay, 2 stories real quick. We had meetings, regular meetings at Saddleback, and on different occasions, these ladies would come, and both of them had come, well, and a gentleman that we also met had come from foreign countries. One was India, one was Brazil, one was Indonesia, and they came with the promise of college or a job or both, basically those two. They were all domestic trafficked in labor trafficking. The young man ended up thinking that he was in an LA building that was a college. It was a high-rise building that he ended up being a janitor for an indefinite period of time until one of the office workers noticed that he had a cot in this far corner and reported it, and he was rescued, and he ended up finishing college. Another lady was in Coto de Caza, a domestic slave, came with a promise of college, and she was going to be a nanny. And so she escaped. She ran down Oso Parkway and found somebody that could help her after 3 years of being trafficked. She was not sex trafficked at all. It was all about the labor and about serving and taking care of a disabled child. And she learned English from the Disney Channel. But she just got her bachelor's degree. She's a huge success story. And another one who was in Pasadena, a wealthy man in Pasadena bought her from Indonesia online, and they brought her, and she was their maid, and she'd come out to the mailbox, and this young man saw her, and he was going to go. He said, something's not quite right. Long story short, he ended up saying, come out to the mailbox at 5 o'clock tomorrow. And she jumped in his car. They ended up one of the happiest married couples we've ever seen. But so to look out in these high-end neighborhoods in Orange County, look out for the one that's not going to school, or the one that's out to get the mail and doesn't look you in the eye. And that is huge in Orange County. Okay.
Well, thank you both. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's interesting to hear what other churches are doing about this, and it's interesting to see that there are organizations out there such as EPIC that are getting men involved, because it's important that men get involved in this for a couple of reasons. Number one, they are the purchasers, and they need to understand what these women are going through. And number two, it's good to have men that can be a good example, for example, to survivors and victims, to see that there are good, godly men out there and not those that are just trying to abuse and use them. So it's good to hear that men are getting involved in this, and this is a great ministry that Isaac has going. So thank you.
Last but not least, men. Remember that when we step up, the world follows. So if we are a good example, then the world will see that. If we continue to stay on the sidelines, the world sees that also. So that's why I'm always looking for volunteers that are called to step up.
So Isaac has a booth out there, Epic, if you want to go talk to him. Thank you both. Well, we are way ahead of schedule. Can you put it on the stand there? Thank you. Thank you both. Let's go ahead and get started, and then maybe, I know some of the people are eating out there, but they can hear out there. So welcome back. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Brenda Flores from the Department of Homeland Security. Dr. Flores is a native of Southern California. She completed her undergraduate studies at La Sierra University and received her Master's of Social Work and PhD in Social Policy and Research from Loma Linda University. Dr. Flores is currently a Victim Assistance Specialist for Homeland Security Investigations after serving as an asylum officer and immigration officer for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Dr. Flores started her career in local child welfare, working with domestic victims of abuse, and then foreign national victims with the U.S. Office of Refugee Resettlement. Dr. Flores has made presentations at numerous professional conferences and seminars, and has participated in numerous state legislator work groups and local task force. And I'd just like to add one thing. We would like to keep your questions. You're going to have a chance to ask her questions afterwards. But I'd like you to keep them to human trafficking. This is a human trafficking event. And there's a lot going on in this country right now that I'm sure you're tempted to ask Homeland Security. But we ask that you just stay away from what's happening at the border and deportation out of respect to her. Thank you. So, Brenda?
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for having me here today. As LeeDelle said, my name is Brenda Flores. I'm a victim assistance specialist currently with the Department of Homeland Security Investigations. I'm happy to follow April and the panel because I think it's giving a good perspective from an actual survivor. People out in the community, and hopefully I can follow up just in terms of giving a perspective from the government or law enforcement agency. So we'll kind of be able to cover all bases. I'm sticking to my notes because I can go on and on my soapbox. I want to make sure I stay on point. Have lots of information to cover, but again, I'm going to keep on task, make sure I get my stats right. So yeah, and then we'll have some time for question and answer after, okay? All right, so I was asked to speak to you today about human trafficking. Human trafficking has lots and lots of levels and layers. It's complex. Really important topic that we talk about. Like I said, we could spend a week talking about the various components of it. But this morning, I want to give you just an overview of what human trafficking is. For some of you, you might know a lot of this. Others, it might be your first exposure. So for those of you who are familiar, please bear with me, but it doesn't hurt to relearn and rethink about things. And for those who this is an introduction to, I hope that we can at least begin to pique your interest and provide some definitions and understanding of this topic. Going to talk a little bit about how the pandemic, forgot to click. Can you guys see? Yes, okay. We'll talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected trafficking, and then last about what Homeland Security Investigations is doing about it. And then I'll also talk quickly about what we do and who we are. So Homeland Security Investigations is the primary investigative arm of the Department of Homeland Security. Our goal is to protect the U.S. from criminal organizations and activity. Our jurisdiction is anything that crosses or touches the border. So this can include drugs, media, video, computers, merchandise, money, goods, and people. Our mission is to disrupt and dismantle the organizations and the individuals that provide these illicit goods and commit these crimes. We work closely with other agencies at the local level, state level, international level, and with the communities, partners like yourselves, who we hope to equip to be able to recognize and report human trafficking. This is a big source of strength and support to us. Oh, keep looking at them. Sorry, I just want to make sure, sometimes I forget to click. All right, so who is Homeland Security Investigations? We have a workforce that consists of more than 10,000 employees. That includes our special agents. We have criminal analysts, our mission support specialists, contract staff assigned through offices throughout the United States and around the world. We have mostly special agents. There's about 7,000, a little more, and they're assigned to a SAC office or a special agent in charge office, or one of our sub offices that we have located across the nation. HSI's domestic footprint is supplemented by more than 2,800 task force members, meaning we have other agencies who are represented within the organization. So we have local law enforcement, other federal agencies who work with us. Our international force is Homeland Security's largest investigative presence abroad, and that's anchored by our special agents who are, again, assigned to embassies, consulates, Department of Defense command posts around the world. So we have one of the largest international footprints in law enforcement. HSI has a broad legal authority to conduct criminal or federal investigations into illegal cross-border movement of contraband throughout the United States. Again, that can include people. HSI utilizes these authorities to investigate a wide variety of crime. As you can see up there, we investigate everything from narcotics, money laundering, smuggling, trafficking, everything that you see listed there. So if there is anything that touches a border across, we are involved. All right, so you saw all the crimes that we investigate. Today, we are here to talk about human trafficking. So we're gonna go ahead and dive right in. Let's start with the basic definition of human trafficking. The TVPA, or Trafficking Victim Protections Act of 2000, defines trafficking as sex trafficking. That's where a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform the act is a minor. Trafficking is also the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services. This is going to be also through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Human trafficking is a crime. It's a crime that involves exploiting a person for services, for labor, or commercial sex. The AMP model, AMP as we describe or called, is used to articulate or clarify if someone has indeed been trafficked. And the reason why I point this out is because a lot of times we might get somebody who reports something and then wonders why maybe that individual or the perpetrator was not charged with trafficking. So it might be another crime that is involved, but it may not rise to the level of human trafficking. So for something to be considered human trafficking, trafficking occurs when the trafficker takes any one of the above actions, so that's recruitment, harboring, transportation, etc., then employs the means of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of compelling a victim to perform certain sex acts or labor or services. At minimum, one element from each of these items should be present to constitute a potential human trafficking situation. Please note that a minor is automatically going to be considered a victim of trafficking. So that whole element of force, fraud, or coercion does not need to be present if it's a minor. So just wanted to point that out. Oops, I did click. Okay, so there's two broad categories of human trafficking. Globally, there's sex trafficking and there's labor trafficking. In the US, it's been identified that these two categories can be broken down into 25 distinct business models, and each of these models has their own way of operating. So sex trafficking, I want you to get used to hearing this, is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to induce somebody to sell sex. Common types of sex trafficking that we see are going to be escort services, pornography, illicit massage parlors, brothels, or outdoor solicitation. Labor trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to induce someone to work or provide a service. Some of the common forms of labor trafficking include agricultural work, domestic work, restaurants, cleaning services, salons, carnivals. Really quickly, I just want to differentiate sex work versus sex trafficking. So how is sex work similar or different from human trafficking, or how can sex work turn into human trafficking? So both sex work and trafficking operate within the commercial sex industry and involves males, females, gender minorities. Not all sex workers are trafficking victims. Sex work situations, however, can transition into trafficking if those elements of force, fraud, or coercion are introduced, and then it can become an issue of forced labor or forced sex. Again, by US law, as we said, if it's a minor who's involved, that force, fraud, or coercion does not have to be present. A minor cannot consent to engage in commercial sex. Oftentimes we do encounter minors and they might tell us, I want to do this. I'm choosing to do this. I know what I'm doing. You know, this is what I want. As a minor, they're not able to consent to that. So just wanted to make that clear. Another important thing that I wanted to stress is that immigration or citizenship is not considered in the element of human trafficking. If somebody is identified as a victim and meets the criteria of being a victim, they are a victim, regardless of their current citizenship status or how they entered the US. That is another question that we often get, because oftentimes if we have foreign nationals or people who are undocumented, they're afraid to come forward and identify themselves or assist with the investigation because of their citizenship status. So a little later, a few slides from now, I'll talk very quickly about options that are available through our agency. Labor trafficking. So when does something rise to the level of labor trafficking? So we can identify probably lots of places of employment that might have some workplace or health and safety violations, or maybe even some compensation violations. And this is basically abuse and maybe some exploitation, but does not necessarily rise to that level of labor trafficking. It becomes labor trafficking when what elements are involved? Force, fraud, and coercion. So, for example, in order to force someone to perform labor or services, a trafficker might have someone living in isolated conditions. They might be monitoring them closely and constantly. They might threaten force or harm to the individual. It might not even be physical harm. It could be financial harm, psychological harm, or reputational harm. They might threaten deportation. They might hold on to their passports or their documents. So now we're looking at this rising to the level of trafficking because that element of force is there. Sometimes an employer might make somebody live in dangerous conditions or inhumane conditions, or work in a dangerous situation. Oftentimes we'll see where traffickers are using these schemes where a person owes money to the employer, or they get to the point where the person is not able to pay the employer back for their living expenses, or maybe that person is not being paid what they're owed or told they're going to be paid. One of the biggest myths surrounding human trafficking is that trafficking occurs abroad or in developing countries only. In reality, trafficking is occurring worldwide. It's occurring everywhere. It continues to be a growing problem everywhere in the world, as well as here in the United States. So where are some of the places that trafficking might take place? I don't know if you can see the pictures there, but I mean, just take a look at some of those. Do we recognize these? Are these prevalent in our communities? Think about, if you look at some of these places, what agencies or regulators or non-governmental agencies also intersect with these industries? We have state licensing boards. We have public health people, county department people that might go in to do inspections. There's delivery people, EMTs, paramedics, financial institutions, banks. So the question is, how can we coordinate with these? These are all potential partners for us because they are kind of our eyes and ears. They're going into these places to do something else, but we can utilize them as a partner to detect and maybe refer cases to us so that we can investigate human trafficking in some of these industries. So how can we do this? This is what, our goal is to go out through outreach and education such as this to some of these partners so they can be aware and start keeping an eye out and identifying and reporting some of this. So let's talk quickly about the scope of human trafficking. So the U.S. estimates about 40 million people involved in modern day slavery across the world. Between 600 and 800,000 victims cross international borders every year. About 14 to 18,000 are trafficked right here in the U.S. Most common form of trafficking is sexual exploitation. The victims are predominantly women and girls. Women make up the largest proportion of traffickers, which to me was surprising. I always imagined it was men, but unfortunately it is women trafficking women. Second most common form of trafficking is labor trafficking, and 20% of all trafficking victims are children. So although trafficking seems to imply that people are being moved across countries and continents, most of the exploitation takes place right here in the U.S. This is called domestic trafficking. The U.S. is a source, meaning we are providing victims, and we're also a destination country, meaning victims are brought here. They're brought to this country for sex trafficking, for labor trafficking. The traffickers are using many forms of force, fraud, and coercion to bring them here. People want to come to the U.S. because they say, it is a land of plenty, opportunities, there's Hollywood, there's, movie careers and acting and modeling and all these things that they're able to do working in resorts. So we are definitely a destination country. Just a few numbers. In 2020, there were over 10,000 reports of human trafficking that were made to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. This involved over 16,000 individual victims. So I know the numbers seem kind of high, but that's likely only a fraction of what's actually going on because a lot of this is not being reported. So since the pandemic, the reports of human trafficking have remained consistent. So what does that mean? Human trafficking does not appear to be affected by the pandemic. Actually, what we're learning is human trafficking is highly adaptable. If one avenue is shut down, then the traffickers are finding a new one. So wherever there's vulnerable people, there's always going to be somebody there who finds a way to exploit them. So since we're talking about domestic trafficking here in the US, an example of domestic trafficking is commercial sexual exploitation of children, or CSEC. CSEC refers to a crime involving the sexual abuse or exploitation of a child for financial benefit or for the exchange of anything of value. Important to note this because things of value for someone, for a child, could be money, housing, clothing, food, transportation. So it's not necessarily just the exchange of money. If you get a child who's in need of basic needs, somebody might exploit them and use them in exchange for them to have a warm bed or a change of clothes or something like that. Examples of CSEC crimes are going to include child sex trafficking or prostitution of a child sex tourism, pornography or online pornography, online transmission of a child engaged in sexual activity or anything that can be exchanged for something of value. On average, a child in the US is going to first fall victim to CSEC between the ages of 12 and 14. Identifying victims of CSEC and sex trafficking it's been difficult because there's been a general lack of public awareness that this is happening. Oftentimes the kids are reluctant to come forward either because of fear or shame or embarrassment. A lot of traffickers take a lot of measures to hide this. A lot of our CSEC victims come from vulnerable populations, kids who have a history of abuse, but that doesn't mean that that's the only source. Keep in mind that a traffic victim, whether it's a child or an adult, is going to come from any background, can come from any gender, any nation, any economic level. So this is a money-making industry. Okay, 30 million people, it's a $150 billion industry. How do we begin to crack down on this big money-making industry? It's a business. What's the motive of the traffickers, regardless of the type of trafficking they're involved in? Money. But it's not just the trafficker. Think about it. Trafficking is actually enticing and a moneymaker for other businesses. Traffickers use banks to deposit and launder their money. They use planes, buses, taxis, transportation services to transport the victims. They're booking hotel rooms, Airbnbs to exploit their victims. They're using lots of social media platforms to advertise and recruit victims. So all these people actually benefit and it can be enticing for them. So again, it's important for us to be on the lookout to reach out to these industries again, to make them aware and make them understand. Some of them are aware, some of them don't really put two and two together and realize that, wow, I am actually enabling and helping the situation. So now we know there's a problem. What next? The first thing, and I think the first step, and I think we've all kind of talked about it, all the presenters, is understanding that a victim and a trafficker can be anyone and come from anywhere. And there's no single profile for those involving trafficking. Trafficking involves, males, females, adults, minors. Like I said, we see trafficking happening in suburban areas, rural areas, urban communities. Traffickers and victims of trafficking come from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. They have varied levels of education. People, traffickers or victims can be documented or undocumented citizens. While we do see human trafficking covers all the spans of demographics. There are circumstances and certain vulnerabilities that lead to a higher susceptibility of somebody becoming involved in trafficking. So where are victims being recruited from? Again, anywhere. Victims are recruited from schools, group homes, parties, malls, online, by families, friends, partners. Runaway and homeless youth are extremely vulnerable. A lot of our runaway kids don't have the network or support that they need at home. They are running away to unfamiliar environments. Oftentimes our runaways are approached, they say, within 48 hours of them leaving their home by traffickers. So they're being approached at parks where they might sleep, bus stops, bus stations, anywhere. Traffickers are pretending to be their boyfriend, a friend, somebody who just wants to help and provide them with a place. They try to entice them with money. Other people who might be recruited and vulnerable are those with significant mental health concerns or disabilities, people with substance abuse issues, or what we're seeing is people who might have a criminal history, a background, and the traffickers are telling them, well, you're never going to get a job with that criminal history, but you can do this and you don't have to worry about it. So they're able to entice them that way. I mean, like I said, they find anybody who might have a vulnerability and they're picking up on that and are able to entice and recruit. Foreign nationals are also easy targets and are highly vulnerable. They're coming to, first of all, they're being recruited in other countries and they're being promised things and they're brought here and they're trafficked. They have these outrageous travel fees that they end up owing the trafficker, but an undocumented or foreign individual doesn't know the language, they're unfamiliar with their surroundings, they don't know the laws, they don't know how to access services even if they are afraid. Maybe they've had bad experiences with law enforcement or public agencies in their home country. So I don't know, I always think about like when I travel and I'm like, what if I was brought here to this country? I don't know, I'm just gonna say, China. I don't speak Chinese. I'm not familiar with the language. I don't even know how to get on the bus and go where I'm going. So I try to put myself in a situation of a person with no money, no phone, no anything in these situations. Who would I call? What would I do? How do I ask for help? So it's just, yeah. During the pandemic, online recruitment increased by 22%. So during the lockdown, we're finding a lot of the common recruitment sites like strip clubs, foster homes, and schools, those numbers went down dramatically, while the internet was reported as the top place for recruitment for all forms of trafficking. Recruitment by family members and intimate partners also went up. It was pretty notable. So for example, for sex trafficking, 42% of those individuals were recruited by a family member or partner. Actually, 42 by family member, so brother, sister, cousin. 39% was by a boyfriend or a marriage proposal. For labor trafficking, 69% were recruited by employers, but 15% by family members, 5% by partners. So it's sad to say, but the trafficking, the recruitment occurring by family members and so-called friends and partners is increasing. Oftentimes, human trafficking is happening right under our nose. It's happening right in plain sight. So we have to be aware of the trafficking indicators. I think that's going to be our first step in making a difference. Also, first step is being here and even being interested to learn about what trafficking is. So we know it's a problem. How do we look out for it in the community? What can we do? What should we be looking for out in the community? So if we're out in the community, we might see a victim. This person may not have personal items. Their clothing may not fit the environment they're in. So I've been out on, operations or rescues where, it's like now, or, December, January, and the girl's in really short shorts and a t-shirt and shivering. So the clothing doesn't necessarily fit the environment. The individual might appear fearful or anxious or upset. They might be withdrawn. They might be checked out, very anxious when they see law enforcement or security approaching. They might not want to talk to anybody. Maybe if you do get a chance to talk to them and you're asking them questions, they may not know where they are, where they're going. They don't know the plan. They're not sure why they're here. Maybe some of their stories might sound scripted or inconsistent. Definitely, if you have someone who's claiming to be an adult, but they definitely look like a minor, they might have a tattoo or a brand. That's something very common that we're seeing now. So those are just some of the things that you might encounter when you talk to somebody. What else? We might notice somebody that is working long hours. This, I think, applies like if we're going to certain, I don't know, maybe a nail salon or a hair salon, and we frequent these places and we start noticing these people are here, long hours. They never get a break. There are a lot of, restrictions. When you start talking to them, they don't know where their money goes or how much they make. They're not allowed to socialize. You might encounter these businesses where you kind of start looking around and there's bars all over the windows and gates and security cameras everywhere and just very limited. There's this manager there who kind of seems to be hovering over everybody, and if they see you engaging in conversation, they might come over to see, what are you talking about? What's going on? Somebody might tell you that they've been, threatened with deportation. Definitely when you see these things, you want to observe. Definitely observe. Take lots of, mental notes, surroundings, people, if there's, driver's license or cars. If there's a danger in that moment, get out of there, call 911. But if it's something that you're just kind of suspecting, like something's not right here, I keep noticing this, I see these things, definitely report it. I'll give you some numbers, some resources, but you don't want to confront anybody. You don't want to put yourself or somebody else in danger. Don't try to rescue the victim at the moment. But like I said, the best thing to do if you feel like something is happening, again, if it's something you feel like somebody's in danger at the moment, 911, always. If it's something that you're just kind of questioning, then call, trafficking hotline or something like that. So other potential trafficking or grooming indicators, I put this slide in because we're not just seeing people out in the community randomly, but a lot of us are parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, have friends with kids. So I wanted to point some of these things out. So if we're noticing maybe a friend or a family member or a student, somebody who's showered with gifts or money all of a sudden from an unknown source, the parents not giving them this stuff, so they might have a fancy new hairdo or new fancy nails. They might have a new cell phone, electronics, gift cards to different places, and you're not really sure where this kid is getting all this stuff from. Maybe that's something to explore further or ask about. If maybe this person is skipping school, they might be missing work, they might be not engaging in some of the activities that they used to, maybe going to church youth group, or maybe before they used to be really involved in sports and all of a sudden they're not interested or they're missing sports. They might become involved in a fast-moving relationship with someone, whether it be a romantic relationship or a friendship, but they're so attached to this person that now they're not even interested in being around their old friends. They're not interested in coming around the family. They don't even like coming out to have dinner with the family. They're basically just, either locked in their room online or talking to this person constantly. So just you start seeing that isolation. Sometimes these individuals might run away or disappear for either a night or for the weekend. They might be spending the night at people's houses that are not family or parents or something, but they're spending the night at so-and-so's house all of a sudden. And just developing a really close relationship with somebody that that they've never even met in person. They might tell you that they met this person online, or there's a friend. I'm just going to give a quick example, and this is with my grandson. He plays online in these groups, and he's always talking about my friend this and my friend that. I'm like, oh, is this your friend from school? No, he's from my group. Have you ever met this kid? Well, yeah, online. No, but in person. No, I said, so then I start my spiel. Well, how do you know that this person is, 10 years old like you? How do you know, he or she's not this old weirdo? And, Nana, I know. And I'm just saying. And, and my daughter called and she says, well, one of these kids from the group actually lives locally, and he got invited to a birthday party, and she talked to the parent. The parent said, yeah, we're having a party and you're free. You can just drop him off and come pick him up. And I told my daughter, wait, what? I said, you're not gonna, I mean, I don't even know about him going, but if you are gonna let him go, I mean, I'm glad he has friends, it's a pandemic and they're starting to get out, but how could a parent just expect you to drop their kid off with you not even have met them? I don't know, the whole thing sounded really weird. He ended up not going, but I'm just saying these things, I mean, I would have never thought, you know, and I said, well, if you're going to let him go, you better ask the parent, make sure and say, you know, thank you for inviting, but I am going to stay nearby. You know, you don't have to feed me, you don't have to, you know, but I definitely need to be with my child. But things like that I had never even thought of. You know, when my daughter was growing up, she wasn't meeting people online, and people weren't asking her to come to parties that, you know, we had never met, let alone me dropping my kid off to somebody that I've never seen. But it seems to be more and more common, and some parents actually are okay with it, you know, because I mean, I guess, you know, think the best of people. We're not thinking that somebody might exploit, and maybe it was going to be a totally innocent thing, but I'm sorry. Maybe it's just me, I'm tainted from the work I do, and I'm overprotective grandma, but yeah, no. No, Nana wasn't having it. So, okay, I just had to, that was one of my soapboxes. I had to throw it out there because I think it's important. It is definitely not just maybe a trafficking indicator, but just that grooming process. So we might even be able to catch these things before they lead into something more terrible. What about the traffickers? What do they look like? What should we be looking for when we're looking out for them? Traffickers can use, some of them go as extreme as they might beat somebody, rape somebody, they might use drugs. They can use something as subtle as, you know, more emotional tactics, financial methods to control their victims. Oftentimes, they might appear to have a really strong bond with their victim, especially the younger girls or boys. For example, they might act as a boyfriend. They're going to claim that they really love you, that they really need you. And any of these acts that they're asking you to perform is for our future together. So the trafficker is going to look a lot of different ways. Some of them they're closer in age. They might be more of a father figure. Traffickers can also threaten the victims and their families. Like I said, they can abuse them emotionally. They can confiscate their money, their documents. They isolate them from their friends and their family. All of these indicators I'm talking about may alert you to a trafficking situation. It does not necessarily mean that this person's being trafficked, but again, coupled with a lot of other things, these are just things to continue to look out for. Who are the traffickers? Well, we've seen traffickers who are operating on small scales, medium scales, large scales, like it says up here. The smaller scale trafficker is going to act maybe as a boyfriend. He's going to be a relative or a neighbor that's going to focus on maybe one or two particular victims. The more medium scale is going to be somebody who's a pimp. There might be a brothel owner, salon owner, farm owner. This is going to be a group. They're going to specialize in something. And then we have very, very large scale operations where these might be individuals operating at an international level, very highly organized. They might be the ones who are recruiting from other countries. They're providing the transportation and smuggling individuals into the country and exploiting them and bringing them for either labor or sex trafficking. Oftentimes these are the people who are very well connected in other countries, and sometimes they have government connections as well. So since I mentioned international networks, let's talk smuggling. Fact or myth? Human trafficking and smuggling are the same crime. Is that a fact or is that a myth? It's actually a myth. So trafficking and smuggling are two different things, but there are similarities and there are differences. And how does smuggling actually turn into trafficking? I like this diagram here. Breaks it up very clearly. So trafficking is always going to be, it's involuntary. It's a crime against a person. It's exploitation based. You don't have to cross an international border for it to be trafficking. And trafficking involves somebody who's either a U.S. citizen or a foreign national. Whereas smuggling is something that somebody does voluntarily. It's a crime against the state, not the person. Smuggling is strictly transportation based. It does require a border to be crossed, and it affects foreign nationals. Trafficking involves exploitation for, the purposes of forced labor or sexual exploitation. Smuggling is going to involve the provision of a service. So typically it's getting somebody into the country or providing false documents. Smuggling does not involve coercion. People are asking to be smuggled in voluntarily. Some smuggling of migrants and trafficking do share commonalities. Both are crimes. A lot of times they involve dangerous situations to the victims and the safety of people who are involved in both. So smuggling and trafficking, oftentimes they occur along the same routes. They're using the same methods of transportation. And in some cases, the perpetrators are both smugglers and traffickers, but they're very distinct. So in this picture, can you tell the difference between the individuals in these pictures who were smuggled versus the ones who are being trafficked? Can you tell? I couldn't tell who was trafficked, who wasn't. So, like I said, smuggling situations may transition into human trafficking if what is present? The elements of force, fraud, or coercion. If somebody is being forced into something, I'll give an example in a minute. A lot of times smuggling does involve violence. In smuggling cases, we see people being taken hostage, they're kidnapped, they're being extorted, physical and sexual assault, but the presence of these crimes alone does not make it human trafficking. And again, remember, immigration, citizenship status does not have anything to do with whether they're victims or not. So when does smuggling become trafficking? So I'll give you an example of somebody we'll call Martha. Somebody told her in her home country, if you give me money, I can have somebody bring you to say, the US. It's going to cost you this much. Once you get here, you're free to go, and everybody's happy. So Martha says, okay, yeah. She paid this person the money. She voluntarily agreed to get smuggled. What happens when Martha crosses the border? This person who smuggled her says, well, yeah, now there's going to be a little bit more involved. I'm going to take you to this person because they actually paid for the cost of transporting you here. So you're going to have to work it off before he'll let you go. I'm going to take your documents. You're going to have to do what he says, and, we'll see what happens. So then her new employer tells her, yeah, you're going to have to pay me this $30,000 fee. You're going to have to prostitute yourself to pay this money off. And if you don't do it, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt your family. Okay, so now here's a situation that is now smuggling that has turned into trafficking because Martha initially agreed to come. It was voluntary. But once she got here, the elements of force, fraud, and coercion were introduced. So hopefully that helps to illustrate when smuggling becomes trafficking. So I'm going to quickly go over just a couple cases that we have been involved in. These cases provide a range of different types of exploiters that we're seeing. We have people who are solo operators to groups. The cases I'm going to talk about will demonstrate the wide variety of locations that people are exploited in. Some of the victims were subjected to force and coercion. Others were lured through fraud and false promises. Some of the cases, victims were recruited and transported from abroad, and some were recruited domestically. So let's just go quickly. In the case of the U.S. versus Vasquez Valenzuela, these were actually 5 members of an extended family who were sentenced to federal prison. So they operated a large-scale sex trafficking ring in the Los Angeles area. They would go to Guatemala and lure these young women. Some of them included minors. They promised them jobs. And these women were very poor, uneducated women. They lured them to come. The women agreed. After they got smuggled into the U.S., the traffickers forced these victims to engage in prostitution, to pay off their smuggling debts. Some of the debt was up to about $20,000. The traffickers were collecting the money from all the victims and were not giving it to them. They would control and manipulate the victims by threatening them, by force, threaten the families in Guatemala. They were even using, they knew culturally they believed in like witchcraft and black magic, so they would threaten them and say, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to have somebody put this spell on you or your family. So they exploited these individuals' fears. And it was actually, I have to note, the taxi driver who was giving these girls rides to their dates started to notice certain things and something didn't feel right with them. So he's actually the one who made the report, and that's how this case came to our attention. Mr. Carter was convicted of trafficking and prostituting seven minor girls. Only one girl was willing to come forward. That's how we were able to identify the other 6 girls. She did not want to speak with us. It took a lot of time and patience with her. She was very scared. She was kind of defensive, and so we definitely had to work with her until she was comfortable enough to come forward. Basically, she was lured by Mr. Carter. She was 16. She lived in Minnesota. They met online. He basically lured her to come to California, paid for her trip out here. Once she got out here, he got a hotel room, gave her some lingerie, took pictures of her, put her up online, and started prostituting her, and he ended up getting the 6 more girls. So the crime took place for 10 years till somebody finally reported. She finally agreed to come forward. So he received 14 counts of transportation and prostitution of minors. So he was also convicted federally. Mr. Abramoff, he was sentenced to 150 years for sexually abusing 3 minor girls. Yay, yay. He would go, for this case, over a period of 2 years, he would fly to Russia. He was actually a dual citizen, Russia and US. He'd go from Los Angeles to Russia. So in 2009, he went in June. He raped a 12-year-old girl. He threatened to cut her head off and play soccer with it if she told anybody about it. Later that year, he traveled back to Russia, abused this girl again and other girls, and then went back again in March of 2010. For some reason, he believed these girls were talking and telling on him, so he got 2 of his buddies to go out and find these girls and threaten them and rape them, and basically threatened to kill them if they spoke about it. So that case came to our attention. We work with the Russian Federation police on this case. And again, this individual who was living here in the US but traveling abroad to commit these crimes received 150-year sentence. Another unfortunate crime that we encounter is child sex tourism, or CST. This involves people who travel from their own country to another country to engage in commercial sex acts with kids. Oftentimes, these individuals are looking for developing countries where there's anonymity, there's availability of children. I hate to say, in a lot of these impoverished and developing countries, families are willing to rent out or sell their children to make money so that they're able to live. So these individuals know this and they'll go to these places. The crime is also aided or helped by weak law enforcement in some of these countries, corruption, the internet, the ease of a US citizen to be able to travel in and out of the country. These offenders definitely come from all socioeconomic backgrounds. A lot of them that we've convicted have positions of trust. They're highly educated individuals. Some of the cases that we've investigated and prosecuted have involved a retired Army sergeant, a pediatrician, a dentist, a university professor. So again, this is happening everywhere. Oftentimes, you know, they're creating child pornography so that they can distribute and use. A lot of times the kids, the victims, are being drugged while there. Just some of the big cases that we've prosecuted with child sex tourism, these did come with very substantial cases. But again, we do take crimes very seriously, whether they're happening here on US soil or they're happening abroad. Okay, how are we doing on time, LeeDelle? Am I good? Okay, all right. So let's take everything that we just talked about, and I know this is very heavy, and I'm sorry, but let's take all that and let's add a pandemic to it, just to spice things up, right? So has the coronavirus impacted human trafficking? Yes, it has. I gave a few stats before. It's been reported that the number of minors ages 9 to 12, that the sharing of nude photos has doubled during the pandemic. So it went from 6% of this age range sharing nudes, from 6% to 14% during the pandemic. For the 13 to 17-year-olds, the number went up just 4%, 15 to 19%. So I hate to say it, but our younger kids are sending more nude photos. We're still in the middle of the pandemic. The data's still coming in, so the numbers are hard to get. The United Nations Office on Drug and Crime published a brief. It basically emphasized what I think we already know, but the pandemic is exacerbating something that's already there. It's making issues among the root causes of trafficking that we already know of, it's making it worse. So COVID-19 is basically disproportionately affecting categories of people who are already vulnerable. Undocumented migrants, seasonal workers, women, children, people with socioeconomic vulnerabilities. So it's just continuing to add to that. The brief pointed out that women, children, and immigrants continue to be the most people affected by human trafficking. So the pandemic hasn't changed that, it just has made it worse. Okay, so let's talk specifically about victims. How has the pandemic impacted victims? Well, like I said, it's made an already bad situation worse. While measures were taken to help contain the virus, so like people having to quarantine, we have curfews, all these restrictions, on the one hand, yes, it was to help us and protect us from the virus, but unfortunately, that actually drove certain crimes further underground, further push the use of technology. So what happens? It means identifying victims now are going to be even harder. It's even easier to hide these types of crimes online. So the pandemic definitely has made it worse. People losing their jobs, losses of income are making people more vulnerable and susceptible or willing to participate in situations that they would have never considered participating in before, but because they're desperate for money and resources, they might engage in certain things. It's definitely, the pandemic has impacted the ability of governmental and non-governmental nonprofit agencies to provide services and resources to victims. A lot of times foreign victims who might have temporary immigration documents or benefits tied to those statuses and visas, everything's basically come to a halt, so they're not able to qualify for certain things. So it really has been kind of a domino effect. If borders close, people who need to be repatriated back to their home countries, that's difficult to do. Confinement has also led to an increase in domestic violence, and especially people who are involved in sexual slavery or domestic servitude. If you have people confined for long periods of time, that pressure is going to build and all these things are happening. So we are seeing higher instances of violence occurring in these situations. Lots of times housing, legal assistance, healthcare has slowed down or stopped. The scary one is children who were out of school are spending more time online, exposed to predators or risk of online grooming. A lot of times our kids, school is a source of shelter and support for them. Sometimes that might be the only meal some of our kids are getting is at school. So kids now might be forced to go onto the streets in search of food or income, increasing their risk for exploitation. Social isolation and distancing reduces the possibility of identification. A lot of people in here I know are teachers, counselors, child caregivers. So we're seeing these kids and we are the ones that are identifying what might be going on. Maybe our kids feel comfortable. Well, if the kids aren't in school, who's laying eyes on these kids? So that was another effect of the pandemic. For labor trafficking, things got worse. There's little to no oversight in the recruitment process. Workers are being lied to about conditions and wages. What we're learning, basically, regardless of whether it's or sex trafficking or labor trafficking, human trafficking is fluid. It adapts to the circumstances. It becomes more difficult to identify victims and enforce the law with operations alone. So that speaks really to getting the word out there, the message out there to people who might have just normal day-to-day interaction to be able to, again, help identify and report all of this. The pandemic has impacted the responders, like I said. A lot of times resources are taken away, services that are considered non-essential, including maybe site inspections or visits, has been affected. So again, we don't have people out there. Resources are being diverted to address the pandemic, so maybe officers are having to enforce curfews and other restrictions like that, so now they don't have as much time to focus attention on a potential trafficking situation. I'm not saying that's happening everywhere, but just generally speaking, that's what people have been reported. So this may have an impact on investigations or arrests. So what we don't want is for the traffickers to think that they're just going to be able to operate however they want during the pandemic. And even something as simple as exposing first responders like law enforcement, paramedics, because there's even a shortage of masks and protective gear. So there are a lot of things with the pandemic that have been affected. But I can safely say that everybody has risen up to the challenge. How have agencies responded? Not just law enforcement, but all agencies. We're addressing the things that we're seeing. We're working on identifying what the patterns are. We're adapting responses to prevent traffickers from acting with, freedom during the pandemic, while making sure that victims are being identified and served. We're using technology. Like I said, a lot of systems were halted. Now we're getting back on track. A lot of things are being adjudicated online, be it restraining orders and criminal cases, that sort of thing. Technology is being used by NGOs to provide services, counseling, interviews. A lot of our prevention sessions have gone online. I was telling LeeDelle I was happy that this still went on. A lot of the events I was going to speak at have been canceled because of the pandemic, for in-person. But we're able to use technology to continue to get out there. We're able to reach larger audiences. So we're kind of rolling with the punches and working with what we have. A lot of the providers and law enforcement are collaborating. We're sharing efforts. We're trying to coordinate, an effort to waste duplicated efforts and waste time. Very quickly, what is HSI doing to counter human trafficking? We do have a 4-pronged strategy. We're looking to prevent human trafficking by building capacity and training people and making them aware. We're protecting victims by going out there using a victim-centered approach to identify them and do the investigations. We're prosecuting the traffickers, assisting with local and federal investigations, and we're partnering with all different task force and NGOs and tribal law enforcement. We have our Blue campaign, stakeholders. We're working with a lot of non-governmental organizations. So that's what we're doing as an agency. Quickly, I have to put in a plug. We established our Center for Countering Human Trafficking. That was just established in October of 2020. What we call it the CCHT does is it coordinates 16 Department of Homeland Security agencies and offices. That's a lot of people with a lot of different skills, a lot of different legal authorities. And again, we're collaborating because we want to make use of all those resources. We want to make sure we're not duplicating efforts because we really do not have time to waste or resources to waste. These are all the agencies, Homeland Security agencies that fall under our branch. So you can see we have a plethora of subject matter experts and people who have different abilities, from border protection to Coast Guard to immigration services, HSI, even our sisters and brothers at ICE, FEMA, you name it, we got it up there. So we're very fortunate to have all these agencies. Really quickly, just bragging about our efforts that we're doing to try to address trafficking. In addition to our efforts in the local community, our Customs and Border Patrol Agency is looking at things coming into the country. So if they identify a shipment where they think that child labor has been involved with the shipment, they're going to put what's called a withhold release order. So if they put an order, a withhold order, the importer can only receive their goods if they're able to provide proof that their goods were not made with forced labor. So I think they have around 3 months to do this. There's very specific things that they need to do to show that child labor or forced labor was not involved in the making of their products or goods. So that's one way we're trying to help. I know Border Protection is trying to go out and talk to the importers to make sure that they're really aware of who their supply chain is. Where are these products coming from? Who's making the products, all the way from the raw materials to the finished product. They're encouraging importers to have specific purchase terms in their contracts with these people where they're promising not to use forced labor. I don't know how well that's being able to be enforced, but the main thing is they're really trying to put out there that we're not accepting or wanting to deal with people who are using forced labor or child labor. So that's another effort. Quickly, I talked about that victim-centered approach, and I think April can attest to this, but Homeland Security Investigations is very victim-centered approach. We train our agents to be victim-centered. We have our victim assistance program, which is a program I worked under. We're there basically to support the agents, also to support the victims. We want to make sure that victims are entitled to certain things, that they know their rights, that we're able to connect them with services. Our program has two components, which is the victim assistance specialist like myself, and then we have forensic interview specialists. And I really need to emphasize the forensic interviewers. They are awesome. They're available to go out anywhere in the world. We don't want to traumatize our victims. These are people who know how to interview, especially children, but witnesses, to get the information necessary without traumatizing the individual. Each locale has a full-time victim assistant like myself. We have the forensic interviewers. So currently we have 30 forensic interviewers across the nation and 35 victim assistance specialists, and we continue to grow. Our stats, I don't know if you can see, but for the cases we supported this last year, there was over 10,000 child exploitation cases, over 700 human trafficking cases, 353 financial crimes, and just other. But we are involved anytime an agent identifies a victim of any federal crime, they notify us. So either we're going out on rescues with them, or we at least contact a victim to give them our information, to ask them if they want services, to provide them with their rights. And this can be victims who are victims. We've seen a lot of elderly financial fraud schemes. That was a big one. So we get to see lots of different kind of cases. Sometimes our victims are agencies. A lot of, let's say the bootleg stuff, but like computers, purses, phones. So some of our victims are Dell, Apple, so we do deal with all kinds of victims. Again, we use the victim-centered investigation and services. We really believe that early on, when a victim comes to our attention, their first experience with the system is going to influence how basically the process is going to go. Ideally, we like to be involved at the very beginning so we can go out with the agent and they can meet us, and it's not just the law enforcement officer who's out there. And sometimes we understand that it's a process. Sometimes the victims are happy to see us. Sometimes they hate us. They don't want to see us. They don't feel like they're a victim. They don't want to be rescued. They're angry. The main thing is we don't take it personally. We don't force them. And I definitely agree with what April said, is we meet them where they're at. If they don't want to talk to us, totally fine. We'll never force ourselves. Here's my card. Here's my brochure. And, feel free to call whenever you want to. Some of them just want, they might need some food or some clothing. So the services that we provide are going to range from anything to basic, food, water, shelter, all the way through some, we'll call back later or want at that point some case management. We can help them with, job training, shelter. So we rely on our NGOs in the areas that we're serving. We know that building trust and rapport is going to take some time. Definitely, we're not judgmental. We're not there to arrest them, just there to reaffirm that they have rights and that we want to be there to help them. For us, a safe and secure survivor is going to be a more credible, reliable witness so that we can also not, just meet the victim's needs, but our goal is also to prosecute the traffickers. So again, just few challenges that we see working with victims. Some of the things that I've encountered, and just a couple key things, is oftentimes we will see the same victims over and over and over again. They might develop a trauma bond with their trafficker, so it's very difficult for them to leave. I know the average, I believe, is it takes about 7 times for a victim to finally leave the trafficker, and that's okay. That's okay. We are not there again to judge. We are there to support. So just want to put it out there, because I know sometimes people can get frustrated and they don't understand. If you don't understand what a trauma bond is, I definitely would recommend just kind of learning what that whole cycle is like, because it will definitely put you in a different mindset when you do. Sometimes people get frustrated and say, well, people, there's help out there. Why didn't you leave? You had the opportunity. Why didn't you run away? Why didn't you call somebody? Why, but there's lots of different factors. Either whether it's fear, shame, we don't know what the trafficker has told them. They maybe have, said, I'll kill your family if you leave me. So there's all kinds of things that we don't know that's going on. So again, just be patient and understand, the effects of PTSD. People become angry, fearful. They might not remember. Sometimes, I know sometimes we remind the agents if they get out there, they're interviewing and somebody doesn't remember details. And, it's like, well, how can you not, this just happened. Well, with post-traumatic stress, lots of things. The memory goes, people dissociate. So again, it helps to become familiar with some of the things that are going on psychologically, trauma to the brain, all those sorts of things. Like I said, we could spend weeks and weeks and weeks talking about all these different things. I did say, like I said, we come across lots of foreign victims. Just want to put out there that they have very specific vulnerabilities tied to their immigration status. The exploiters, the traffickers take advantage of this. They know that these people don't know what's available. They can't speak the language. They're scared. They might be threatening to deport them. They hold, their documents. So if we encounter, or you might come across somebody who says to you, this is happening to me, but I'm scared to tell somebody because, I'm here illegally. I don't know who to talk to. We do offer, I'm not saying or guaranteeing that everybody's going to qualify, but there are definitely several forms of immigration relief that might be available to a victim. We have continued presence, the T visa, the U visa, or somebody might want to just flat out repatriate and go back home, and we will assist with that. Again, there's more information. We can talk later offline about that if you're interested about the different forms of relief. They offer different benefits. There's different criteria. But again, just so that you're aware that there are multiple forms of relief possibly available. As I mentioned, we could not do any of this without our NGOs. They're very important partners. As an agency, we're not able to provide direct services, so we coordinate with the non-governmental organizations. Like I said, they help us with medical care, mental health care, job training, legal assistance, child care. Some of our victims might end up having criminal cases as a result of their involvement with trafficking. So, we have the NGOs that are helping assist stabilizing that and getting them back on track with that. But the role of the community, just as important as the law enforcement agencies and the NGOs, is the community. How can we help as a community? Definitely what we're doing here, we're trying to recognize the signs of human trafficking. As I said, if you see something, say something, report your tip. Be a conscientious and informed consumer. If you're going to places where you see things that are not right, you're feeling like somebody might be trafficked, or that their goods are coming from places that, they're maybe getting places where we know there's child labor going on, stop spending our money there. Let's not frequent these places. So just be informed. As our panelists and our survivors said, volunteer or support your local organizations. Stay informed of what's going on in the community. Lots of times, like people have said, a lot of people don't think it's happening into your community. It's happening. It's happening to some degree in your community. I can guarantee you of that. Just wanted to plug in, again, sidebar. Somebody brought this up recently, and I didn't have a slide to put it in, so I'm just going to say, keep in mind, going back to our kids, because that's just really, heavy on me right now to keep bringing up our kids at home. Nothing is real for our kids anymore unless it's posted or documented somehow. So this is a new reality. I know for me it's definitely new, but it can be dangerous. Sometimes they're documenting or posting things that they shouldn't. At the moment, they feel it's okay, but a lot of times, I do remember as a kid, I didn't remember the long-term effects this was going to have. And before, when I was growing up, we didn't have anything that documented something forever and ever and ever. So it's important for our kids to understand that just because you delete it off your phone or you erase it, once you put it online, it is there forever. So that's one thing. Another thing is that kids are posting fights that are going on or crimes that are going on, and they're so consumed with getting it online, they're forgetting to report it and call the police. So we're having law enforcement say, okay, don't forget to call the police. You're watching this person getting beat up. who's calling the police? Well, I don't know, everybody's too busy putting it up online. So just remember, I know it sounds like, really, do we have to remind people to report things? Actually, yes, now we do. So another phenomenon, and I had to just bring this up, that is also very common, because we get a lot of kids who really do say, you know, I didn't know, and parents are like, how could you not know? Airdropping. So they might be in their quad. I know now not everybody's in school, but people are going back to school. So we're getting a lot of kids that are getting images on their phone or their devices, and they're like, but I didn't, it's not mine. And parents are like, how did it get on your phone? Well, it is possible, because now kids are able to airdrop explicit images and inappropriate things. So just be careful about settings. Be very careful and mindful of kids that are online. We see situations where a parent is in the same room, but the child has a headphone on, so they can't hear the conversation. The kid looks like he's innocently playing a game, but there's a side chat, and the person they're chatting with on the side is trying to entice them, and I'm going to give you a V-Bucks card to, you know, if you send me a picture of you naked. And the parent is like, but I was literally, and you could see, you know, the parent sometimes was, you know, right in the background washing dishes. They were literally physically 2 feet away from the kid, and the kid is being exploited online. So again, just be very careful. Lastly, the big thing is cyberbullying, subtweeting, or social assassination, where people just go online and, you know, not people, but kids are going online and making up lies and basically character assassinating other kids online, to the point where it is cyberbullying, but it is very dramatically affecting these kids. So just, our kids are being so bombarded to participate and pressured to do things that they probably would not normally do. So, you know, just since we are at home a lot more, kids are being a lot more isolated. I just, like I said, I had to just throw that out there. There's lots and lots of resources available, and I should have made another slide. I'm just going to say it, so I don't know if this is the time to take out your pen or make a note. Again, I'm not endorsing any one or the other, but these are the ones that have come up with other presenters and other agencies. Smartsocial.com is a really good one to find out kind of what's going on with, you know, what the kids are using out there now, and what they're used for, and what they do. Just because, again, a lot of our kids are getting to know people online. They're not really getting to know people in person or who they are. So National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, has some great resources, and they're very age specific. So if you want to kind of bring up the conversation with your 4th grader, it gives good tips for that age range, so it breaks it up. So a Polaris Project also has good stuff, and so does the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So just go onto their websites and look around. They're good conversation starters, because we cannot be afraid to start talking about these things with our kids. Obviously age appropriate, but they definitely do have things now for even smaller school-age children. I know we go out into the community, to the school districts, and we gear our presentations for, you know, depending on the age. So we're available for that as well. Lastly, I'll make a plug, is our Blue campaign. It's a national public awareness campaign designed to educate the public, law enforcement, other industry partners that I was talking about, to recognize what the indicators of human trafficking are. How do we appropriately respond to these cases? The Blue campaign has basic training and awareness materials. So there are things like information sheets on my table back there. I have little posters, big ones, small ones. They have really big ones available. Pamphlets. We have the human trafficking indicator cards that you can, you know, put in your wallet in all different languages. Training and awareness videos. These are all resources that are free to use. So you just go online and you can click on the ones you want, how many you want, and they'll be mailed to you. Here are just some resources that I put up there, and definitely people always ask, so what if I do see something? What if I want to say something? So we have the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the Cyber Tip Line, 911 is always a resource. I know that we really work well with the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The reason why we like the referrals from them is they have people who speak different languages. They're open 24 hours a day, and the information that they collect it works very well to go ahead and get the investigation started, and they also are familiar with what agencies should be getting which cases. So I would encourage you to call the National Human Trafficking Hotline to make any reports. So, I said everything that I wanted to say. Thank you so much, and I think LeeDelle was going to help facilitate some question and answers. I don't know, how long we have? We're good. Okay. And then lastly, I don't know, am I cut off? I didn't know if you, there you go. In case, if you wanted my contact information, I also have some cards out there on the table, and I'll be out at the table if you had any additional questions. If you think of anything later that you wanted to ask, either were too shy or just thought of it, please feel free to contact me as well.
Jonathan, this microphone isn't working. There it is. There it is. Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to get the microphone to work. Are there any questions? I can bring the microphone to you.
Hi, thanks so much for all the information that you gave us today. Obviously in the news, you had the Jeffrey Epstein thing happening most recently, which I think brought to the fore quite a bit of the human trafficking situation for kids. And didn't know, first of all, if you guys were all involved in that. Secondly, now that they've completed the trial and everything's been sealed, how do we feel as the victims? How do those people feel now not being able to be heard? Because now a lot of those people are, I think, being put in the background because potentially high-ranking officials might have been involved. So I just was curious about your take on that whole thing.
Again, I mean, we really can't speak to, because not everything is completed, so we're not able to speak too much, and I wasn't personally involved in that particular case, so I couldn't speak to it. Generally speaking, though, and hearing from our survivors, some are happy to not have had to testify or come forward, while others do wish that they, had the opportunity to come forward. I know, for example, with the victims that we work with, because of that, some of them don't want to come forward but do want to be heard by the court. They do have the opportunity to provide testimony or statement via written form. So, I mean, that's why we're there, and the agents, we always encourage victims to participate if they feel up to it. We want to provide support and services to help that. We're never going to force a victim, but again, for those purposes, we offer different alternatives if they want to participate without necessarily having to get up and confront. The U.S. Attorney's Office also takes that into consideration as well. So hopefully that kind of helped answer.
Anybody else? Oh.
Thank you for your presentation. It was great. Can we get a copy of that, or at least get that information that you have?
I can try to do an outline. Unfortunately, anything with our logo, we're not able to share or send out, but I will try to get at least an outline if that'll help, and I can get it maybe to LeeDelle, who can send it to the larger group, or you can email me personally, and I'll try to get something out. And that goes for anybody. I wish I could share just the presentation itself, but I'm not able to. So, okay. But we'll try to figure something out.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great, because it's great information. Can't remember everything.
I know, and
it's a good reference point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh. I wore my tennis shoes today just for this.
Yeah. Also, thank you for what you shared. Two questions. One, I was confused when you said that when you encounter victims, you don't pressure but if they're children, that's different, right? You have the right to do that. You mentioned that if they're a child, then it's a crime. Is that correct?
Definitely. If it's an adult victim, again, we cannot force them to identify themselves as victims. Since they are not being considered criminals, we can't hold them. So sometimes they just say, I'm done. I gave you the information I could, and I'm out of here. Even though if we say, but do you need a place to stay? We can't force them. If it's a child, though, yes, definitely, that's where the forensic interviews come involved. Depending on the situation, we might have to contact local child protective services. If it's a foreign national, we work with the Office of Refugee Resettlement. So there's lots of different people involved, but again, a child is definitely different, and those are handled very, very especially in every case, I have to just mention, is case by case, because each person has a very different situation. So not every case looks the same.
Thanks. Also, just in the last 2 days, I have seen a mother with children at shopping centers, one at Bristol Farms in Newport Beach, and then another one at Westcliff Plaza, also there. And just when you were speaking today, it was like I thought they could be being trafficked, the family. Is there something appropriate or that you would suggest if we see something like that we could ask them that would not get them in trouble, but that they would know that you're, what would you suggest on that?
I love,
and that's a different, there's different reasons why they're there too.
Definitely. And we can't, we don't know what their situation is. There's, like I said, we have the little cards with trafficking indicators on them that they can stick in their words. It has the National Human Trafficking Hotline, so if you're comfortable approaching somebody with that, like I said, I would never want anybody to put themselves in danger, or the victim in danger, but if you feel, that you can discreetly maybe say, hey, are you okay? Is there anything you need help with? Might want to give them that. I love the soap and the wipes, like things like that where we're not going to be endangering the victims or endangering ourselves, but yeah. Definitely something like that.
Anybody else? Well, thank you, Brenda, so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you. I know we've provided a lot of information for you today, and I'm going to provide you a little more. But what I wanted to say was, we've already given you information about someone that has been trafficked, so you've seen what kind of trauma they go through, and force, fraud, and coercion. You've already seen what other churches are doing in this area of human trafficking, and especially, which for men, EPIC, which is a good thing, because we do need to get more men involved. And you've just been educated with a lot of information from Homeland Security. So what I want to talk to you about is, what can we do? We pose the problem. What can we do? What can we do as an individual? What can we do as a church? Oh. So, whoops. One of the first things we can do, and it's already been mentioned, pray. Let me tell you, what's happening on our streets, what's happening online, that's spiritual warfare. We cannot fight it as individuals. We can be the best organization, the best person, working 24/7. We still need prayer. So please, please, please add to your prayer list victims, traffickers, sex purchasers, advocates. Start a group at your church to pray, to stop human trafficking. Our Lord can do that. So I urge you, every one of you can do this. Now you've already left with one thing you can do, and we've just started. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, this is what both April and Brenda was mentioning. This is a national hotline. I urge you right now, take a picture of this screen, put it in your phone, if you miss it at my booth over here, there's a flyer that you can take a picture of that. 888-3737-888. That's the National Human Trafficking Hotline. If you ever see trafficking happening, call that number and report it, and they will investigate. If you're visiting your cousin in South Dakota and you see trafficking, report it, and they will investigate. Just to give you an idea of what happens here in Orange County, we have the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force. Not all areas, geographical areas, have a task force. We're fortunate to live in an area that does. But we're also living in an area, Orange County is a destination spot because there's a lot of affluence here. And so traffickers will bring their victims from other states, other counties, here to make more money. So what happens here, just to give you an idea, if you call the Human Trafficking Hotline, they will notify the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force. The task force will work with the local police wherever it's reported. And hand in hand, they will take a victim-centered approach. You've heard about that being talked about today. They will take a victim-centered approach. They're not out there to arrest them. They're out there to help them and offer them resources. So at least I know how it works in Orange County. So you know that you're doing the right thing and they will get help. They won't get arrested. This is a number that victims can also call. I urge you, if you go and talk to a victim, be very careful. It is dangerous because the trafficker is nearby and he's likely armed. So I urge you, if you think you want to approach a victim, I really wouldn't do it. But if you find someone that you meet and you know that they're being trafficked, give them this number and you can help them. Spread the word. God brought you here today. You're here for a reason, and I hope you learned something. How many people did not know that human trafficking was happening in our communities? How many did not know that? Okay, just a few hands. Do you know when I started doing this about 7 years ago? Very few people knew that it was happening. We would have had half the room raising their hands saying that more than half didn't know what is happening. That's because people are starting to spread the word. People such as myself. These organizations out here, they're doing something about it. They're spreading the word. I urge you to leave here and tell everybody what you learned from Brenda, what you've learned from the exhibitors. So people are aware that's the first step in doing something about it and that they can report it. And reporting it will help get rid of it. The other thing you can do is have someone talk to your church or organization. I do that. There's plenty of speakers out there that you can have come talk. And that's another way you could spread the news. You can let people know that it is happening and what they can do out there. You can participate in a walk or another type of event to bring awareness. Once you start getting involved with some of these organizations, you're going to find there's a lot more than you thought there were. A big one, a walk that's done. How many of you are familiar with Christine Kane? I love her. She's amazing. Those of you that don't know, she gives a Christian message. She's a great speaker. Google her and look her up on YouTube because I love her passion. She has an organization called A21. A21 is a worldwide organization that she is rescuing victims of human trafficking all over the world. And once a year, she does a walk to bring awareness. You as an individual could try to find a group that's already put together to do it, or we as a church can actually put our own group together and lead one of these walks. They provide you everything that you need. All you do is you show up, carry signs, and walk. My husband and I have done it. It's great. Encourage lawmakers to be tougher laws on traffickers and sex buyers. Do you know from what you just heard, do you know that in California, the trafficking is not considered a violent crime? So we need to, when there's an opportunity to do something, to vote the opposite direction on things like that, we need to use our voice. There's currently a bill. How many have heard about SB 357? Yeah. SB 357 is a bill that decriminalizes loitering for the purposes of prostitution. So that when they say prostitution in the law, that also means the trafficker, the pimp, and the sex buyer. So this law has passed through all of the state legislatures. This law is expected to go onto our governor's desk soon. This law has key components, and this law should not happen. It should be vetoed because there are key components in stopping child sex trafficking and identifying those who would exploit children. The current loitering law allows our officers to do that, to identify children that are being exploited. And we need to stop it. So I urge you to contact our governor, and tell him we want you to veto this bill when it gets to your desk. If you want a sample letter, go to my table out here, and I have sample letters that you can send to him. But anytime there's a law that's contrary to making extreme laws for traffickers and sex buyers, we need to be stopping it. You have the best experts out here. The best experts around this area are gathered right over there. You're in the right place today to learn what you can do and increase your education. Prevention. The highest at risk of being trafficked are foster care kids. They're one of the highest. Olive Crest, you can talk to them about being a foster parent. I think they even have programs where you don't have to be a full-time foster parent, but you can talk to them about that. Track. They're out there too. They have a camp that they put on in the summer for at-risk kids. You could talk to them. What can I do? Can I provide some services for you? Can I provide some materials for you that you need? We also have an area of prevention is FatherCon and See It End It. Patrick's booth is out here. And See It End It is a conference that he puts together where you watch movies, documentaries, and it educates you more on what's happening and how you can end trafficking. FatherCon is another great one for men if you want to get involved. Patrick's the same booth as See It End It. He has a conference every year to show men the importance of their leadership in the family, the importance of being a good father, the importance of being present with your children. If you're a father, if you're not a father and you want to get involved in that, I urge you to talk to him. Then we have the organizations out there that are currently helping those that are in the life now. You heard about Keeping Every Girl Free, April, what she's doing with the soaps and the facial washes. Northeast of the Well and Gems Uncovered have partnered. I volunteer with them. We go out on the streets on a street outreach and we talk to the victims. If you feel like you want to interact with them and help them, if you're feeling led to do that, talk to Gems Uncovered or Northeast of the Well. Lives Worth Saving, I talked about that a little bit with the phone outreach, but they're also doing something about sexual exploitation of children. They go to the dark web and they find children that are being sold and sexually exploited. The numbers that they find are astounding. That's a teaser for you to go talk to them. Epic, we heard about Epic. Men, there's another area where you can participate. The Orange County Rescue Mission. Orange County Rescue Mission is also a good place that you could use. I have it for helping survivors. I'll talk about that in a sec. But you could also help prevent victims of human trafficking being victims, because you could offer to help volunteer there to mentor some of the children so that if they're homeless again or if they're once they're out of graduated from Orange County Rescue Mission, that you can keep them from being at-risk children to be trafficked. Stepping into his image, she mentors survivors of human trafficking, and she does it with exercise, yoga, and with devotionals and scripture. That's a great, she talked to her about what she's doing. Well, I missed one thing with Orange County Rescue Mission. They also have Strong Beginnings. Strong Beginnings is an aftercare facility there, which is part of Orange County Rescue Mission. They're always looking for volunteers. They may have a needs list that you could do a drive for you at your church or with your organization and help them. Fair Trade LA. Fair trade products are important that we buy fair trade products and talk to Fair Trade LA. Fair trade products are, and Brenda talked about this, fair trade products are things that the organization that is producing the product, it has been certified that where they're buying their resources from are not using child or forced labor. And you can look for labels such as this that you see up there on things like coffee, sugar, tea, chocolate. Look for those labels, and that assures you that in the case of chocolate, where they pick the cocoa bean in another country, they're not using forced labor or child labor. And you can do your part just by buying something to eat or drink. If you want more information, go to the Fairtrade LA booth. So what can we do as a church? You can have a movie night. We've done it here at Refuge a few times. There's movies out there that point out what's happening in human trafficking. There's 8 Days. Another movie's called Priceless. Kathy talked about Playground. You could show a movie and get your congregation involved in what's going on and educate them and have someone speak a little bit afterwards about what's happening. You can do a drive for a nonprofit. Again, you've got all these nonprofits out here. Talk to them. Get a needs list. Get a group together and do a drive for them. You can do a fair trade day on a Sunday. You can have a table that educate people about what fair trade is. You can urge your cafe at your church to purchase fair trade coffee and serve that whenever to the congregation. We need to also address reducing demand, and you can do that. One of the problems that we have with sex buyers is porn is something that leads them to want to purchase sex. That's a biggie. Many men that are purchasing sex are addicted to porn. Porn addiction is just as bad as heroin. So we need to educate people on how bad porn is physically for you. It can physically change your brain and make you want more porn, to watch more porn. And porn today is extremely violent, which causes the viewer to want to act out this violence on a woman or a child that he has purchased. But one thing we already have here is, Mike, can you stand up a sec? I want to introduce Mike. He pastors Refuge Recovery here. So Refuge Recovery is for those that have addictions. He helps them with addictions. And I urge you to see him if you have an addiction. If you're addicted to porn or you know somebody that does, please seek him out and come to his sessions to get help. If you don't go to Refuge, it doesn't matter. If you're not a believer, it doesn't matter. He will help each and every one of you. So what are we Refuge going to do? Those of you that don't go here, you don't have to stop listening because you don't come to Refuge. You're welcome to join us. So February 28th, I'm planning on a meeting that we're going to have here at the church at 7 p.m. And I want to plan out what we can do as a church for the next year. Do we want to walk in the A21 walk? Do we want to show a movie night? Do we want to do a drive? Do we want to get the youth involved in maybe doing the drive? So if you're interested in doing more, please come. I urge you to get onto my email distribution list. I have a sign-up sheet over at my table. I don't inundate you with emails. I'm kind of too busy, to be honest. But I do send you emails about what's happening with human trafficking, what's happening with Beacons4Victims, and I also send prayer emails, so you can pray for victims, survivors, and people that are that need help. Email me if you leave here and you want more information. Feel free to email me at any time. And I urge you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming today. I want to thank the exhibitors for taking the time out of their day to come and educate you. I'm very pleased to see all the activity that's been happening in the exhibitor area. I want to thank all my volunteers, and we do have a prayer team. I think I mentioned it in the beginning, but if you would like prayer, we have a prayer table out here, and you'll have people in the prayer team that are walking around with badges that say, "How can I pray for you?" I want to thank my wonderful husband. I mean, I could not do this without him. I am so blessed with a man that he puts everything together, and he just is the best. Security, childcare, and all the other, Jonathan, our tech guy, and all of the other, yeah. all of the other people that have been a part of this. This is not just LeeDelle doing all this. It's a lot of people and a lot of prayer involved in order to put this together. I know you've been given a lot of information, but go out the exhibitors and take some of that information and talk to them. They'll be here for a little while longer. Childcare, make sure that you get your kids before 1 o'clock. The Haiti Medical Mission is still serving food. They still have about 30 lunch boxes if you want to do that instead of going out and support them. And I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope we can do this again. Thank you.